Board, David.
Okay. All right, we're recording now.
Lovely.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there are, a few more comments from people.
Yeah, David, I'm happy to jump in. Mine's very short. I'm in Port Macquarie. I have a sense and feel that our community has a sense of, I guess, natural optimism, but also, I guess, the fear of becoming hopeful. We've just been knocked over, and we're just not confident to become hopeful just yet, because each time we do, something else comes.
Sounds challenging place to be in. Yeah, anybody else? So a few other comments just to help us, get a bit of an idea about what's going on at the moment.
I'll jump in. So hi David, I'm Tali. I'm Richmond Valley CDAT based in Evans Head at the Neighbourhood Centre. I'm a youth worker, so our CDAT is very youth focused. We have copped it bad with floods. Our two surrounding towns are Broadwater and Woodburn. Both of them are our way out of town. So I wasn't directly impacted in my home, but we were isolated for a good amount of time. But I think it's just the vicarious trauma a lot as well. Like my family's lost homes, but also just seeing young people and their family members just go through it. I think it's huge. And just with even work, we've all had to jump into emergency crisis mode and sort of put our own normal work at the back and join in and just do what we can just to what's needed at the moment. So everyone is just feeling exhausted. What Josh said, it's huge, and it's huge for everyone, no matter whether you're directly impacted. Everyone's impacted. So I think we've just really got to tread lightly, have compassion and empathy, and just try and get on with it, but don't burn out either. We've seen a lot of people just trying to do everything and then everything on top. It's like, these programs are really good with being able to adapt and everything as well. So that is awesome. But just watching out for each other as well, and just making sure we're looking after ourselves. Great comments.
Yeah. A slow recovery is better than a fast recovery, and preparing to run a marathon rather than burning all of your energy in the first few months by running a sprint is much better as well. Unfortunately, but there isn't too much we can do about it. And I think particularly after the way in which some communities have been impacted by these flooding events, just so severe, recovery is going to be long. Now, last year, Melbourne University, who has been conducting studies following the 2009 Victorian Black Saturday bushfires, came out with the recommendations. They've been running longitudinal studies for a long time now and working with communities. They came out with a recommendation, and it's been adopted by Red Cross, that on average 5 years should be allowed for recovery. Now, I don't sort of say that to make people anxious, of course, or to think the worst about it's going to be 5 years of terrible experiences or anything like that, but I say that because it's an important starting point that relates to setting expectations, and also importantly, as you were just touching on, whoever just spoke, conservation of energy and preservation of health and well-being, because we see all too often, for example, the stereotypical example of people that just dig in and get going from day dot after the disaster, and don't really stop for a few years. And by the time they get 2 or 3 years down the track, and it actually doesn't take that long, given we also have had in the background fires and COVID, and some people in communities are already very tired, they get 2 or 3 years down the track and the physical body is exhausted, and various health issues are well and truly starting to emerge, never mind coexisting mental health issues. And then there's all of the diagnosable, subsyndromal type challenges that people can experience as well, relationships that aren't working. But we'll come to this as well. So yeah, looking after yourself, being kind to yourself, supporting those around you, but keeping in your mind that this is going to be a longer term process as opposed to something that shorter term is very important at this point. Because it's really early on, it's just a couple of months now. Yep. So I'm going to just push on. I want to sort of share with you firstly then, or secondly actually, some key effects or key problems that take place very commonly or really after every single natural disaster. And this is despite the fact that communities are different and natural disaster experiences or natural disaster events themselves are different or have their own unique characteristics. So the first one is stress. And essentially there are, or what we can focus on are two types of stress. There's adrenaline-driven stress, which equates to survival mode. I guess probably more commonly out there thought as fight, flight, or freeze. And then the second type of stress is endurance mode, which is driven by cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that gives us access to energy that we wouldn't otherwise or usually be able to access. So it kind of tends to go something like this for people that have a natural disaster experience, that there's the lead up to the day, although there may be no lead up if there's no warning and there's a very sudden sort of occurrence or onset of the natural disaster. But then there's the experiences on the day, or days or weeks, again, depending upon how long the actual event goes for. At a minimum, that's generally stressful for people, but at the other end of the scale, it can be traumatic, where people have a near-death and very frightening experience. And then there are the range of experiences in between that. Now, pretty much everything, though, on that scale, or the way I've just explained it there, will result in activation of survival mode in the human body and the mind, which is what we are adapted to do. And the purpose of activation of that survival mechanism or this alarm system is to increase the chance of survival, plus mobilize energy that will enable us to face the threat essentially and get through it. Now, usually then, and I won't go into all of the detail, but I'll just say the human body and the mind, incredibly adaptive, and a whole series of changes take place within a very short period of time. In an ideal world, or in an ideal situation, the event will pass, there'll be no further disruption, stress, or problems in our life or in people's lives, and that would then enable the human body and the mind to gradually come down out of that survival state and re-establish a healthy state, a healthy, balanced state of functioning. That might occur, for instance, if you had a car accident. There'll be the days and the week or two afterwards where the mind and the body are sort of settling and processing that experience. And then for a significant proportion of people, for the majority of people, they will return to healthy functioning, and that accident will just become, sort of a past memory without leading to the formation of any significant difficulties. Disaster experience is usually pretty different to that, though, because there are the events of the day, and then there's actually everything that comes afterwards. We're 2 months in, or you're 2 months in, I should say, and the first person, Josh, I think, who made some comments, was talking about the disruption and the uncertainty. And knowing, talking to Tanya, it sounds like things are very much up and down. There are lots of community-based and sort of social and housing and living-related challenges. So that means that the path is not clear to just ease back down to a normal, balanced, healthy state. And this is what can then, in time, if this goes on long enough, contribute to activation of the second stress state. That being because we can't stay in adrenaline forever. The body can't sustain that heightened state indefinitely. And so there usually is a transitionary point somewhere between 3 to 6 months down the track, where the body if we're facing constant life challenges, housing-related challenges, for instance, dealing with or liaising with an insurance company, managing our own personal experience, but working in a professional role and supporting community members, as many of you are, then the body and the mind will again adapt to that situation and shift from survival mode to endurance mode. And endurance mode essentially means that we prepare to endure, to be able to keep going, to run the marathon. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the intricacies of the stress state and why they're important to be aware of. But I think at the moment, the take home would be, I would be assuming most of you, if not all of you, are in a heightened state of stress at the moment. Maybe not full-blown adrenaline survival mode, although maybe some of you go back into that when it rains. You might become triggered, but it definitely sounds like many of you are already enduring, and you can feel the tiredness underneath. That's the consequence of stress using up energy and resources. I'm only going to talk through a few slides and then I'll stop at the end of each section, okay, and sort of open this up to conversation. The second key effect is disruption to normal daily life. And the starting point here is to say that in normal life, we generally have constants or constancies that underpin how we function on a day-to-day basis. Constants are things that we take for granted, that we're not consciously aware of. So an example of a constant or a constancy, and there's many of them, is that if you're in a paid employment role, your salary turns up in the bank account on a fortnightly or monthly basis. You know, you don't question it, it just appears and it's there. Another constant or constancy is that the ATO takes a portion of that in tax, and you don't question that. You might not be happy about it, but they take it anyway. But on a more serious note, you know, other constancies are things like when you finish off work for the day, you return home and your house is there, or your neighbours are next door, or you walk inside and your family or family members are there. And so the direction that I'm headed in with this is to say that life generally has a sense of predictability and certainty because it's bound together by constancies which are held together in routines that we don't consciously think about. And that process there frees us up to think about other things or consider and do other things, like driving to work in your car, which would be a constancy as well, whilst thinking about the clients you're going to be talking to, you know, and whilst you're doing that, you're not usually giving any thought to the car breaking down or having an accident, for example, or needing to be taken to hospital. Now, an important point to link to this idea of constancies, and that there are psychosocial constancies that underpin normal daily life, is that of safety. Safety is in fact one of, if not the biggest constancy that we have in our Western way of living. Although I've been saying over the last couple of years in sessions like this that with the increasing frequency of disaster events and pandemics and things like that, it's maybe being eroded a bit. But generally, we tend to take safety for granted. That's a big constancy. Now, when a disaster event comes along, and you are all, of course, right in the midst of this, the constancies that underpin normal daily life, normal predictable life, and normal safe life are disrupted. They're pulled apart. And then for people that have a traumatic, frightening experience, those constancies are shattered or can be shattered. And that's the essence of trauma, but I'll touch on that briefly a bit further down the track too. So disruption is a big one, and that is why in time, as things start to settle, returning to routines is really, really important across the course of the recovery journey. Now, just briefly, another key effect is loss in disasters. Although the loss is varied, it's diverse and varied, But there is a typical community experience to view loss as being determined materially. That is, that the amount of material loss I or someone else experience is the main determinant of how much loss they have suffered. But I bring this up because there are many varied and intricate ways that people can experience loss. I was up in Queensland 2 weeks ago visiting sort of outback farming agricultural communities affected by the 2019 inland flooding event, monsoonal event. We weren't really able to get there because of COVID. The trip was cancelled 3 times. The most prominent thing that farmers spoke about in terms of loss was loss of their livestock, and the suffering of the livestock was, something very, very significant for them. Fences didn't matter so much, you can put them back up. Machinery didn't matter so much, you can rebuild them. But the livestock was the one that, had really impacted people significantly. Yeah, someone going to say something?
Yeah, I noticed, David, interesting. I wonder that myself about farmers and in this flood, because in 2017 I got caught, my daughter and I got caught very quickly in the flood, and we were very lucky to survive that. So that was a treacherous time. This was very much more severe than that one. And what I noticed, and strangely, she was only 2.5 at the time, she says to me, "It smells worse than the last flood, Mum." And I said, I was like, "Really? You remember?" She goes, "I can smell like it's, I think you called it," she said, "I think you called it dead." And I thought, and it was the lot. So the amount of livestock and animals and that had passed in this flood was, it wasn't like that in 2000. Well, I didn't experience it that way as I did this, and it lingered. That smell of it just lingered for days.
Gee, yeah, and she was so young then, and that sensory trace, is what we would probably call it. She's been left with that. It's interesting. Tanya, she's okay. So just bear in mind varying forms of loss, and probably the other key point to make here, in your work with community members and yourselves or family members, is I'm sure you'll come across people who minimise their loss, and they'll typically say things like, "It's not that bad for us. We still have our house. It's worse for Joe Bloggs up the road. They don't have anything." There's a term for this, which is a technical term for doing this, which is relative deprivation. But if people do it too much or too intensely, what they tend to do is negate their own experience. And a consequence of that can be a disconnection from self or self-awareness, which might stall their own recovery, which is something we came across with the farmers in Queensland, because they're highly stoic. Everybody else is worse off, but very few of them had actually really stopped to acknowledge the impact of that event on them. So it was all just sitting underneath the surface. It came out in general conversation very quickly. And I don't know if this is happening for people in your communities that went through 2017 or 2007, I think, depending on where you are. But that's something else, and that is, it's not at all unusual for there to be re-triggering or reactivation of past disaster experiences or other past traumatic events. I'll just say then that there's usually financial impact, and that the greater the financial impact, then typically the greater the risk that endurance mode lasts. Why? Because people are often trying to recoup their losses, and they do that at the expense of their own health and well-being. And then
David, sorry, David, we did have a comment online.
Oh, sure. You might have to just read them out to me when they come through.
Yeah, sorry, I'm doing a bit of a juggling this morning.
No,
So
no,
this
go
is
for
from
it.
Di in regards to impacts. It was exhausted from double community needs from COVID. This has not subsided. Ongoing trauma has impacted, especially the huge range of volunteers across Coffs Harbour, many now travelling or needing to look after themselves. Service in community services with low volunteer numbers are worn out and struggling to meet the escalated needs, and the cost of living and limited housing. So there's a number of different aspects that are compounding there.
Yeah, and so these are, these are those context-specific issues that are just so relevant for the experience that you're having. I mean, I will say we probably will only have time to touch on them briefly, but they could be covered in more detail. There are ways to start to address and tend to these different issues that that person has mentioned in the chat. And then fifth problem or challenge, I should say, is that people come into contact with a recovery journey, and for some, if not many, they haven't been through this before. That might not be true for everyone in your communities, though, who've had prior flooding experiences, but it's just that it brings people into contact with agencies, organisations, systems, etc., that they often have no prior experience or familiarity with. It's a foreign experience, and that brings with it its own challenges. I have a comment here that expectations are often unrealistic. That is, people aren't generally aware that personal recovery, never mind material recovery, usually does take a long time. So the common experience for community is that everything is going slower than what it should be. Yeah. So the early recovery challenges, this isn't all of them. It's just a few key points that are relevant. That I put here that I thought would be relevant for you at the moment. But usually during the first 3 months, the recovery system, so the psychosocial recovery system, is forming itself. People are recruited into various roles, throughout the, I'll say the industry, but throughout the sector. And it's not at all unusual for people to have varying levels of disaster experience, from none at all to a lot. There's then, and as you have mentioned, a number of you have mentioned already, it's very common for there to be dual impact, a community member that's directly or indirectly affected, and I'm working with and supporting people. Outside of your CDAT roles, but for other people, and this is really just a kind of a heads up as to something that happens, but the external organisations and agencies will recruit people or second people into roles to assist in recovery. But these roles are often based upon funding for a set period of time, 6 months, 12 months, sometimes beyond that. And unfortunately, although not all of the time, but unfortunately what that can mean is that there's a turnover of workers or staff.
Yeah.
And community can find this quite frustrating, challenging, and difficult, because they establish a connection with someone who then moves on. They get someone else new coming in who doesn't have local knowledge. And after 2 or 3 times of doing that, you can imagine some community members just say, that's it, I'm not doing that anymore, and will sort of close themselves off. So I sort of bring this up, not to say this is what will happen or what always happens. There's a tendency for it to occur. But I think if you live and work in a community, then being able to, again, preserve your health and well-being is just so fundamentally important, because you're probably the ones that will be around the longest after all the services have gone. So I wanted to make that, really at the end of the day, so much of what we're talking about is human connection related, relationship building across the course of recovery. I'll pause there. Any questions or comments or things you want to know? Effects or otherwise, things that are related to that? Feel free.
I think I might just, in thinking about like if that secondment part. I think that's something that can be sometimes really missed, and just even having people just displaced. I have family that were down at Bellbrook, so they were, you know, in the middle of the Karai bushfire. And, you know, for those communities, when they have workers that are seconded, and then on top of that, you've got, you know, the local builder who his whole place burns down, and, you know, as well as the shed with all the tools and everything, and then they relocate to be in town. Just those fractured, you know, linkages for the community, and just how much that kind of compacts that grief as well. Like, it's an ongoing loss. Yeah, and I think, yeah, again, it's sometimes not seen or thought of, and until, you know, 2-3 years down the track, you know, when you're starting to look at, yeah, we see it a lot with the health service here. I'm in Armidale. You know, you've got people seconded on top of being seconded on top of being seconded.
Yeah.
And you're just like, so who's doing what? You know, who's in what role? So if it's confusing for me in a service space, how much more so for
community?
People?
Yeah.
And it's, again, a constant reminder. Well, why are you seconded? Well, I'm seconded because this person's off doing this, and then that person got seconded because the other person's off doing, you know, bushfire or flood recovery, or, you know, whatever it might be. Like, it just goes on and on. So yeah.
So there's maybe, or I think, probably not even maybe, but I really don't want to come across as being unoptimistic. I probably really just do want to be realistic and put things across in a way that is going to be most helpful and beneficial for you and for community. But we can probably say at this point that the recovery services are going to be stretched to their limit across the course of the recovery journey, because for so many variables which are outside of my scope, but I guess just, you know, simply fires, COVID, and enormous flooding impact. But I think then what I say to you is that when natural disasters are big, you know, by definition, the services that are available struggle to cope. You know, that's the difference between, say, a natural disaster and an emergency. An emergency is something where the response, you know, there are adequate resources available to respond to the event, but with a natural disaster, it's about size and impact and significance. So then I guess that the link or the linkage that I wanted to make is that if we're kind of thinking and expecting that the services are always going to be stretched and there'll be, to a certain extent, turnover, then what we can do, and well, I haven't fully brought this into this presentation in terms of slides, but I'll mention it now because it is just so important. But now what's really clear in the research, although it's been quite clear anecdotally for decades, probably some of my colleagues would say, but social connection or social capital is the strongest predictor of recovery compared to anything.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, so, and we could talk about this for a long time, but I think as you start to work with, well, as you continue to work with community members and maybe start to think about what's going to be most helpful, or most helpful for people, or at least, you know, provide a good level of benefit and help, then we can be starting to think about how social connections can be formed via activities, events, some community-led, others supported by organisations and agencies, others facilitated, that are going to bring people together on a regular basis and help them to stabilise their experience. That's something that will, you know, provide immense benefit and help people. And we could, when we can, talk in more detail about how to do that and what examples of that are. But I guess a take home is social connection and what a valuable and important role it plays.
I think that is such a that is like a big take home one of the biggest I know even in recovery in drug and alcohol, which has been my back specialty for many years now, that is the one thing we come back to is always social capital and that connection, and then out of that there's some levels of purpose that are inspired at times, and belonging.
And Tanya, you could let me know, but I guess I'm thinking that your clients with drug and alcohol issues probably also have, I'm making assumptions here, but probably also have, many of them, complex personal life histories with early life trauma, probably with early life attachment trauma and or other challenges and difficulties. Events like this will re-trigger that, reactivate it. Some of them will be hypervigilant, of course. Drug and alcohol use might go through the roof. Other mental health issues will increase. Attachment, connection, support can help stabilize that. Now, there's an American researcher called Daniel Aldridge, Professor Daniel Aldridge, he experienced Hurricane Katrina in the US. Some of you may have heard of him. Moved with his family to New Orleans 6 weeks approximately before the hurricane hit. Then all of their material possessions were destroyed, but they survived. He's gone on to be a preeminent natural disaster recovery researcher. He's a sociologist by trade. And what he has done is, academically, he's identified the specific ways in which and the specific types of social connections that support and assist recovery. So I won't go into this in heaps of detail, but just as an example, I think his sort of first set of studies, or the first work he did, was in Japan after the triple disaster event, which was the earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear reactor meltdown. And, they started, he and his research team started going to impacted communities with the view that the communities that would be recovering the worst would be the ones that had had the most material devastation and or the most loss of life. And what they found very clearly was that wasn't the case. And what was sort of the mediator, what was their finding? Well, the more connected communities, the ones with high levels of social capital and connection, and with very particular types of social connections, they were the ones that were recovering better, irrespective of those things, and also irrespective of how much money had been poured into a community, along with the myriad sort of other services. So social connection really keeps showing up not only in his work, but also in the Beyond Bushfires work in Victoria, even in New South Wales following the 2017 floods, that you had it shown up in research as being very, very important in terms of promoting recovery.
It just in that is a very poignant moment, David, you're making, because I think about our love heart symbol we've now got in Lismore of the red love heart. So it's almost like it's an emblem, a logo for connection. And driving the Koori Mail was instrumental in so many different ways. But what they've got set up is almost like a tent city, and I see I feel it driving past this like, oh yeah, they've got us. There's somewhere we can have a cup. I see someone having a cuppa, sitting down, rain, hail, and shining. The city's there, the little city's there. Yeah, really poignant point you make.
Yeah, that's really nice, Tanya, and it will just be so important for that sort of positive connection to be able to continue on. I'll again explain a little bit more when we move on to the different phases of disaster recovery, but as people tire, things can fracture a bit. But this is again where social connection and activities and events that are, have some thought put into them can be so beneficial. I want to just touch on trauma. Don't worry, it's not going to be like a trauma lecture or anything like that. I just want to kind of give you some key important points. And I'll read a bit off the slides, but I'll just sort of go a bit more conversational as well. So the figures are something like 5 to 20% of people following a natural disaster develop something like a formal diagnosis of PTSD. That rate varies depending upon the event, and the varying characteristics. I want to mention to you as well that there's so much that's relevant that's also not related to just having that formal diagnosis. And some of those things include that most people after a natural disaster event don't go and seek formal treatment, don't end up in a counsellor's rooms, don't end up talking to seeing a psychiatrist. It's only a smaller proportion of people that actually do that. There's also been recent research to show that the average length of time that it takes for a person to go and seek formal assistance for a trauma or for trauma following a disaster is over 10 years, 11 years actually. A long, long time. So what that then tells us is that there are a significant proportion of people out there after a disaster event and, for many, many years afterwards, who have had a frightening experience, a near-death experience, they've never sought formal treatment for it. And this is why there can often be a disconnect between the provision of formal support services, they get put into an area or a community after a disaster event from external organisations and agencies, but they might not be taken up and used. Now, again, I'm not saying this applies for you. It definitely applied in Queensland following the monsoonal event. Of course, farmers and agricultural communities are probably the people least likely to go and talk to a psychologist anyway. But what we heard of were many stories of a lot of services coming into areas immediately after that flooding. But guess what? Everybody was out working on their properties, dealing with the material impact, and they had absolutely no interest in going to talk to a mental health professional immediately. So then some of the organisations and agencies, and this is where the local context knowledge wasn't there, we're sort of standing around scratching their heads, wondering, why is nobody using our service? Well, if they're not going to use our service, we're going to leave. And so they started to leave impacted communities 3 to 6 months down the track. But there was one organisation that had, an allied health or health organisation that had been in these communities, visiting these rural communities prior to the flooding. So they had some pre-established connections. And then what they did was, after the flooding, they just started outreach, going out to properties and visiting people and sort of digging in, and while farmers were repairing fences, hanging around in the background and having a chat to them over a cup of coffee, tea, that sort of thing. And they were spoken of so highly across the communities. They had really sort of proved themselves. They were well respected, and they were now 3 years later really embedded within the communities. So what I'm kind of getting at here is the need to adapt the way you provide services in the aftermath of a natural disaster. The sort of business as usual approach won't necessarily work, but you'll have to figure out what's best for your community and what's going to enable you to connect with them.
David, one CDAT, or 2 CDATs in particular, embraced what you've just mentioned there about services being there, but not waiting for the people to come to them. They actually went to them.
Yeah.
Tenterfield was actually one of those. They recognised that. And put together some care packages that the allied health services took out to those people that they were talking with, just to give them something to remind them that when they are in that position of not being caught up in everyday survival mode, and they can go into healing themselves, that they had those resources there for them. So Tenterfield did that really well. And the other one that did it was down around the Condobolin area.
Yeah, that's great. And so, of course, then what you have forming very early on is a stable connection with someone that can support you, which straight away begins to help reduce heightened stress levels. And if that, that connection is maintained or that relationship is maintained, and of course it's built on trust and all of these other important things, then we can at least do a couple of things. It can potentially work to assist someone to process their trauma, but if that's not within a person's skill base or ability, there's then the potential to link them with a service, if it's available, that can do that work, when and if a community member is ready. But I guess then the other thing, to come back to the social connection and activities and events, is that there's great benefit in those events, because what community members will also do is they will informally process and digest their experiences by talking about them with one another. Yeah,
that's exactly what's happened, David. And I can't speak for what the outcomes in the Tenterfield region are, but I do know from the Condobolin area that they had a greater connection of particularly the men in the community that won't reach out for help, and how they've slowly come together on a regular basis to support each other, have a cuppa, talk about the dog that's barking down the back that won't let go of the sheep, those sorts of things, everyday things, just to feel like they can regulate themselves and feel familiar and normal in those spaces.
Yeah, that's great. Really good. Okay. All right. So anyway, we've got this formal condition, PTSD. It's caused by the stress of experiencing trauma. More informally, I guess, or less clinically, we can think of it as being an event in a person's life defined by its intensity, their incapacity to respond adequately to it, and then there's the upheaval and long-lasting effects, across a range of different areas. Now, just out of interest for you, and regarding Black Saturday in Victoria 2009, mind you, this was sharp, raw trauma with a lot of loss of life. However, I know that you've had a lot of loss of life as well, depending on which community you're in. So 3 years after, 26% of people had high-level PTSD. 10 years later, 22%. It's a long time afterwards. So PTSD, and or depression, anxiety, substance use. Women were more likely to experience PTSD than men at 3 years. Major life stresses, these are the secondary stresses, all associated with poorer health outcomes. And then what I also always want to draw people's attention to, because they can be the missed group, because we have this mainstream traditional lens of diagnosing mental health conditions, but having a mental health condition is not the determiner of impact or effect. Of course, it does indicate a level of impact or dysfunction or difficulty in functioning in different areas of life, but you don't need to have a mental health condition to be having a really tough time in the aftermath of a disaster. And in fact, what happens a lot of the time is that very capable, high-functioning, resilient people push off to the side all of their usual life priorities and put a focus onto doing what needs to be done in the aftermath. And this is partly driven by the body's innate stress response, which causes us to tunnel or to focus onto the problems or the issues or the challenges. And many people can sustain that way of functioning for quite a long period of time, for a year or two. But that doesn't mean that they will maintain healthy functioning indefinitely. Everybody has a limit. And so this kind of links back to the early point of this conversation about taking a preventative approach. So I think probably this slide here I've already spoken to earlier on. I have, just out of interest and to draw a link, because I wonder if it might apply to some of what you're coming across, but I also went to the Lockyer Valley a couple of weeks ago, spoke to recovery support people like yourselves and allied health support people, because of course the Lockyer Valleys had some terrible flooding and had awful flooding in 2011. The locals describe it as an inland tsunami, which came in the middle of the night, I think, or early morning, no warning, and just washed people away. Yeah, terrible. what commonly came up there was re-triggering of those floods. So people re-triggered and reliving and remembering what they had been through a number of years earlier, uncertainty and heightened emotion in terms of anger and frustration in particular. And there were some very specific causes for this, which I won't go into the intricacies of it, but they were sort of the three key standout features of what that particular community was experiencing at that point. So, unprocessed trauma was well and truly at the surface.
Mm.
And I think we have to try not to become too anxious ourselves about that occurring, because it does occur, and because you won't be, even if you feel out of your depth, able to refer somebody to a health professional, because there won't be enough of them, and there will be that issue I mentioned before. A lot of people won't want to go anyway. They'll just want to stay with you and talk with you. And in the early days, again, I don't know what systems or processes you have at CDAT, but in the early days, at this point, there still is great benefit in just being a source for people. But then in terms of specific strategies or techniques, anything that you can do to help people regulate their stress levels and help reduce that heightened state will be helpful. So I'm just wondering, yeah, please, yep, feel free, yep.
Because the slides that you're referring to, we seem to be still on slide number 3.
Oh,
and I think
really?
I had this issue last week. I think on your screen, that's better. So we're moving through now. I don't know what you've done.
So what about now?
Yep, we've got slide number 11, the nature of trauma. That one's up there. So it's but it might be still buffering at your end.
Has it changed now?
No.
No, it's still on we're still on number 11.
So if I do this, is it changing?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So I might just leave it like this then.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Sorry to
That's all
interrupt.
right. No, that's right. Oh, sorry everyone, because I've been yabbering away and the slides haven't been changing.
No, it's okay. And David, your camera's off, just so you know.
Oh, gee, it's all happening.
Hey.
All right. I'll try and stay on top of the IT. Yeah, apologies, everyone. We'll get the slides around. Hopefully it hasn't mattered too much. All right. So what have we covered? Local context, key effects. There weren't slides in there. I just sort of spoke to it, but social capital and social connection. And then just touching a little bit on trauma and sort of help seeking and the benefit of providing support and assistance to people to stabilise them in this early stage. Yeah, does anybody there, I see there's quite a bit in chat, questions or comments or, things you'd like to bring into the conversation? Please feel free.
The social connection side of it, David, that's something that we've noticed and was an enormous amount of trepidation and uncertainty when COVID first hit. We'd all gone from being so familiar with being in the room with people and showing up in those travel times and those sorts of things to now going online, hence even today of that, the word that they've used a lot of is that pivot. And that readjustment. I think that even through the online, yes, we've had some social connections, but the real embracing of people wanting to get back face to face. What I'm seeing in the work that we're doing is we've got a really lovely blend as well of recognizing that we can still connect socially online, and we have that time component, we've got that given back to us by not having to travel so far. But I think it's going to be interesting to watch how it is that we readapt to being able to be out there in the world. And we know that there's still some people out there that are really hesitant to get outside of their safety bubble. I'm literally, weirdly, today is my first day out of isolation, and here I am still at home, but I've not physically gone outside of my little patch that I'm in. And the thoughts that went through my head is, even though it was, oh my God, I'm going to be in isolation for 7 days, I've actually become quite comfortable being in that space. So now I'm pushing myself back out there. So it's those trepidations and hesitations, I think, that are going to be part of what we're actually going to be working with in this space moving forward.
And also, you know, to what extent, well, there'll also be those people, I guess, that don't have access to technology or are not familiar with it, or, you know, were anxious about using it. So we're probably going to have a blended way of connecting. But I completely agree with you. There's absolutely benefits, you know, in the way we've been forced to adapt, because there will be, and I think there's an opportunity here for sort of increased reach and an opportunity to connect through technology, definitely. Yeah. We probably just have to, anyway, I can see you nodding, but we just have to be really careful to not assume that, or to not forget that there's that portion of the community or population that just won't be able to do that. Yeah, anything else that comes to mind for anyone? Otherwise, I'll just talk a bit about community and stages of recovery. Because then there's very much the individual experience that a person has, you know, and again, I'm just scraping the surface here, not really even, of course, not even touching on talking about children or youth or families, but there's the individual experience that a person has, but that doesn't occur in isolation from the community within which they're a part, even if they're not consciously aware of that. You know, we all live within a community, and we're usually all members of subgroups within a community. So disasters impact community functioning, and they are very much a social process. Some of you have already been describing, you know, parts of the social process, which is so common, you know, so commonly associated with and a feature of a natural disaster. For instance, there's in the early days, or in the early, I should say, weeks and months, there's the fusing together of connections, of social connections. People tend to bond together in a very positive way. You know, we're survivors. We will get through this. We will see symbolic representations of community connectedness start to spontaneously appear. After the Black Saturday fires, for example, in one of the communities, there were the bumper stickers, well, not bumper stickers, people put them all over the place, but there were the stickers that represented survival and rebuilding. You know, they were a symbolic representation of community being fused together in this common experience, or in the common experience they had. So the positive fusion, I'm going to mention its different terms to you, but the positive fusion is generally always there in the beginning, but one of the challenges is sustaining it. And actually, it wouldn't be helpful to sustain it at that high level indefinitely anyway. So there's going to come a point where it does start to change, and sometimes it begins to break down. But let me just mention a couple of other important initial points. So if you just for a moment try to use your imagination and picture this as representing a community structure, a disaster community structure, where the different colours represent people that are members of a subgroup of a community. So I don't know if I said this is the Lithgow community, but the greens are all the parents of the children who go to a primary school, the local Lithgow primary school. The reds are the RFS members, the yellows are something else, the blues are something else. People typically have memberships of different subgroups within their community, and then there are all of the linkages in between individuals and between these groups. Now, the linkages are the grey lines, they're the bonds that connect people, And if we had a bit more time and I was with you face to face, I'd probably start to say to you, what do you think these connections are made out of? What are these bonds made out of? How do we form relationships? How do we maintain them? Eventually, or maybe straight away, we would get to that these bonds are made out of communication. The way in which we build and maintain relationships as humans is through communication, verbal, non-verbal, written, etc. But this is really a really important point, because communication is the most concrete tool that we have to work with in the aftermath of a disaster. And the nature and the quality of the communication that we sort of provide and supply to affected people is crucially important. For example, it needs to be, as much as is possible, factual, because what you'll also see, for instance, occur in community not too far down the track is the myths and the rumours or the misinformation. It only takes one person or a couple of people to make a comment about a particular grant that's available, or somebody who is qualified for a grant and they got that much, and it spreads like wildfire. It's the wrong phrase to use, but it spreads quickly and can actually cause difficulties and challenges. But anyway, this diagram, look at a starting point of where we usually begin. I want to just mention a few key points to you, or key terms. So we've got the normal social system. So we're moving into phases really of the disaster cycle here. We've got the normal social system, or pre-existing community structure. I just showed you that. There's the impact of the disaster event itself, which changes that structure, because that structure is not adapted to deal with a disaster experience. It has to change. And as it changes, there's something that we refer to, we'll call debonding. And debonding refers to the ways in which those social connections that bind people together are set aside. And this is where we see, in the 4 to 8 to 12 weeks afterwards, a very fused community. Everybody is kind of doing the same thing together in one way or another. We're dealing with the flooding event, or we're dealing with the fire event. Have you heard of what's happened to so-and-so? Right, we need to assist and support them. Daily functioning is quite significantly focused on the aftermath. Everybody's sort of kind of pitching in together and trying to deal with the challenges and the difficulties. This is going way off down the track, although within the first year, but cleavage planes are then something that can start to emerge and undermine the integrity of a reforming community, because recovery after a natural disaster does involve, of course, a new community structure forming. But cleavage planes relate to points of difference that open up. An example might be, what's an example? An example that comes to mind is, it relates to a bushfire experience, but a community that was burned, where their neighbourhood house or community house was destroyed. And then, further down the track, when the funding came through to rebuild, the community group that was, I guess, coordinating, responsible for helping with the planning of the rebuild of that building, made the decision that it should be rebuilt in the unburnt section of the community. And that was a really sort of difficult issue and divisive issue amidst that community, because of course those from the burnt section wanted it rebuilt where it was originally. Why put it somewhere different? And it's just a very simple example which can potentially have devastating impacts, because you can have community members that were great, had great friendships, were good friends, and something like this can really undermine that and affect that. So this would be further down the track though, and it's something that we give particular attention to when we're talking about or working on community-led recovery. That's the 7th point there, and the disruption I've mentioned to you already. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flick through a couple of slides because I want to bring you to this one. Have you seen this diagram before? Doesn't matter if you haven't at all. I wouldn't expect that you have. So those terms I've just mentioned to you, that's one lens or way to look at different phases of the recovery cycle. This diagram that I've just brought up on the screen is another. It's a diagram that, you know, does the rounds and has been around for quite some time in the disaster recovery space. Have a look at it and let me know what your thoughts are about where you're at, or about where your communities are at the moment on this cycle.
It's a really good diagram. It's Josh here. It's a really good diagram to look at. It's I can see myself on this journey looking at it. It's quite accurate. It's incredible.
Yeah. Where do you reckon, Josh? Where do you reckon, Josh, some of your community members are at? So I know when I was when I was up in the Lockyer Valley, the overwhelming feedback was here: anger, frustration, disputes.
Yeah, I think that's probably some maybe falling down into that exhaustion part and loss of support. They feeling like that it might be dying off a little bit.
Yeah.
As much as as quick as it goes into the media and as fast as it falls back out. That 1 to 3 days is where it really gets me. It's so accurate, you know, when we all bound together as a community so quickly. We went out there, we did everything we could, we donated, we helped out, and then more things arise and you start dipping. You're like, oh, it's not ending. It's not ending.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Remarkable. So I would say somewhere on that slip downward towards exhaustion is definitely where we're at.
Yeah. Anybody else? I think someone was going to say something there.
I was just going to ask if you could just increase the size of your font a little bit, David. Just down the bottom.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Yeah, brilliant.
Does that help?
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. And so there can also be, again, I want to emphasize that it's not all negative, but there can be the 6-month blues. Get 6 months in and that tiredness has really kicked in, along with, or often in combination with, the lived experience of timeframes, you know, not meeting expectations 6 months after, and for some people it will feel like really not too much has happened still. And then the sort of other relatively common experience is that toward the end of the first year, and I guess I'm giving you, of course, a bit of a snippet or an insight into some of the timeframes here, but it's also not at all uncommon for community members to be heading toward the end of the first year, you know, or they get to the end of the first year and the anniversary comes up far more quickly than they ever thought. But there is this deep sense of tiredness. But then there's also the realization, particularly if they've suffered a lot of material loss, that this is going to go for a long time. You know, it would be unusual in a bushfire affected community, really, for many people to have started a rebuild in the first 12 months. There'll be some that get going, but you know, even on that, we've unfortunately got added complications now with all of the COVID supply chain increase of cost issues, which 30 to 40% I hear is sort of the average increased cost for rebuilding. You know, is just a fraction of homes in Victoria that have been rebuilt at this point following the Black Summer fires. And we know it's going to take a lot longer than what it ordinarily took. So these are things to consider. I think, you know, just bearing in mind that probably some of your communities, you know, came into this flooding experience already pretty tired. In fact, I think someone brought this up in the comments earlier on.
Yeah, you're right there, David, in the conversations of when we go through the fires, like the drought and then the fires, the pandemic, and now the horrendous flooding in particular areas, is that it's oh, sorry, there's other things going off behind me there. The length of time, that's not something that you're able to really grasp until it's a reality in front of you. You anticipate, okay, well, I can do this, but I think Kai mentioned it earlier, where there's been fires that have gone through and they're builders and they've lost everything. So the people that are there to help us rebuild aren't able to help us rebuild. So it's those kind of, and the frustration that sits in that then impacts on that exhaustion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so look, I won't go back through the slides I just skipped, because what I want to do is make sure there's time to cover the last two sections and then sort of open it up to conversation. All right, what I did want to mention, let's just have a look here. No, that's all right. So what does all of this mean so far? Well, disasters are all too often life-changing. They affect individuals, but they are social events as well, with these different phases. And you're sort of identifying with it, I think, connecting with the diagram that I just brought up on the screen. Clinical treatment isn't always necessary. Psychosocial supports are invaluable. I can't emphasize that enough. Trauma and difficult life experiences can be processed informally through social relationships, social connection, community-led recovery activities. I mean, we absolutely need to have the pathways to formal treatment and supports, and know how to identify people in need. But there are other ways that we can support people at the same time as well. Long-term process, and we could have a whole conversation about what recovery actually is as well. But maybe in a nutshell, to just bear this in, key points to make to you and to bear in mind would be that for many people, it's not going to be getting life back to exactly the way it once was. Becoming recovered means that generally I'm able to stop living life in the present, looking back at the past, focused on what has happened, trying to deal with the aftermath, and I'm now more able to live in the present and actually start to look to the future again. There's this, great sort of community recovery person and mentor that we have in Victoria that helps communities around the country who had his own disaster recovery experience. And he talks quite openly about the phases or the experiences that he and his wife had. But he says it took quite a few years before they could, before they arrived at the point where they could start looking at their future life again and deciding what they wanted to do with it. Yeah. So two just last, I guess, key sort of points or sections to cover with you, although they're quite brief. I just want to show you a couple of diagrams relating to the theory of stress. And then I think just probably also really importantly, highlight to you how the heightened state of stress affects people's functioning, their ability to think clearly, their ability to therefore be involved in so many of the recovery-related tasks and activities, and also how it impacts and affects people emotionally. An easy way to get the ball rolling is to show you this diagram. At the start, I talked about key effects: stress, adrenaline survival mode, and cortisol endurance. So what I'm showing you here is something called general adaptation syndrome, which is a theory regarding stress developed in the early 1900s, which is now commonly accepted and common knowledge. In fact, it is because of that work way back then that we even have the word stress in the English language. But what we have essentially is a starting point, ideally of good health, where everything is in balance and working in the way that it should. Then there's that high stress state, survival mode that I spoke to you about earlier. Then there's resistance stage, the stress continues, people buckle down to endure. But if they're not replenishing, their energy reserves or their resources as they're being used, exhaustion is the end point. And exhaustion has, in the recovery world, coined the phrase recovery from recovery. You know, I showed you that diagram a moment ago, and what isn't on there is the phase of recovering from recovery, because that is sort of multi-year long process. Again, imagine if you need to rebuild a home, and that's not the only determinant of impact though, but other things can happen. It uses up a lot of energy, heaps of energy. Just building a house outside of a pre-disaster experience is stressful and exhausting. So we find that people all too often, if they're not aware of this stuff and don't plan for it, and importantly, don't work to very deliberately keep a sense of normalcy to their life where they invest in priorities like relationships, get to a point where they're exhausted. And this, I couldn't emphasize it enough for you as well. Yeah, you know, I'm sure that you're in the field that you're in because you want to assist and help people, and now you're also impacted community members. And by the way, stress and high emotion is contaminating, so you'll get caught up in it all. And the very, you know, nature of stress, I think I touched on this before, which is that it causes us to focus and tunnel on the issues and the problems, innately causes a disconnection from self. You know, your people will just stop typically doing the normal things that they would do. That would be the kind of leisure and pleasure activities that would have ordinarily replenished them. So we need to come back to those sooner rather than later, you know, as soon as it's possible. All right, so I've just got a couple more slides going into more detail about those stages. I won't read them out to you. These I can only tell you it's really well documented in the literature everywhere that prolonged stress causes lots of health issues. Yeah. And these are all the great ones that can come about, unfortunately, all to do with cortisol. All right, so early intervention priorities. Let's just sort of have a think about where we're at. Can I just ask for some comments? What are you maybe struggling with at the moment or finding most challenging in your day-to-day interactions with your clients and community members? You know, is it just being able to have a conversation because people can't sustain concentration, or could be managing emotions, they're so heightened? What sort of things are occurring for you?
I think managing the emotions, but also managing the expectations, and a lot of gap filling that we have to do. I don't know, it's really hard. Certain things where you're just like, well, no, we wouldn't normally be in this space, and we wouldn't normally be having these discussions, but where else are these people going to go, or how else are they going to get this kind of support? I mean, it was bad enough for us as an organization that we actually chased up philanthropic grants to bring in drought recovery people and employ them ourselves, because we knew that the funding for all that's gone and dried up. But all the people, all the farmers regionally here, are still impacted. They're still recovering. They're in no way, shape or form ready to move on.
From the drought, so with the farmers, Kai, do you mean from the drought. Or they've been impacted by flooding as well?
Well, so kind of particularly on the edges of our LGA, we've had not only the drought, but then, floods in varying degrees. There were the ones last year too. Not as big of an impact, but that impacted the Manning Valley. But then the mouse plague on top of that.
That's right. Yes, I heard about that.
Let's plus COVID, plus all the stock prices. Sure, they might have all destocked during the droughts and, you know, made huge losses there. But if they want to get back on their feet now, the prices are through the roof. You know, and it's that kind of ongoing stress that we're dealing with, coming up against, which it's just been relentless. And yeah, when you consider the last particularly 4 years, you know, and that's on that level, let alone just the ongoing impacts. Like, we're starting to get families through our work, through my current work, that have had to relocate from, you know, the Lismore area and are seeking supports around that. So, you know, there's kind of this first-hand, second-hand, third-hand knock-on.
This is the cumulative impact.
And
where there hasn't been time to recover.
No, not at all. It's there's still people recovering. There's still people, you know, trying to claw some semblance of, you know, working towards the future. I think that's a really good what definition, that one. You know, they haven't had a chance to. It's been one thing after another. So
Okay. And so is this, I'm just picking up on something you said there, is this meaning then that, you know, in your sort of ordinary session or sessions or visits maybe with your clients, that, you know, there would ordinarily be that sort of business as usual type stuff that you'd want to cover, but the cumulative impact of all of these other events is instead sort of finding its way into, you know, every conversation, every visit, sort of every session that you have? Is that what you mean? And just sort of spilling over, flowing over, and, you know, you're finding yourself working to manage that with a person?
Yeah, I think it's that, plus I suppose, like, you know, like, I mean, even this last week we had we're already having clients, for instance, that are ending up being homeless for the first time in their life because the person who owns their house has decided to sell and there's no rentals in town. And so that's one side of things. Okay, that's, you know, kind of when that was run of the mill, that was easily enough supported. But then you have the next client that makes a referral and calls up for help, is currently living in a hotel because they've moved from Lismore and they want help finding a rental. And you're like, well, that's not going to happen. But that's the reason why they've contacted you for support. So it's like, you've then got to go through the process of like, well, we're limited in what we can do, but you know, we want to support you, kind of no wrong door policy, and you know, try and help you get linked in. Let me think. Well, normal places you'd get linked in with is, you know, the Women's Homelessness Support Service, the Women's Ref. Oh no, they don't have any space. You know, they've got no room for supports. And like some of that's been compounded by local issues. We had our youth ref burned down last year, which wasn't great. But, you know, like, it's just that kind of ongoing, there hasn't been a time to stop. We also had a tornado here. I don't know if you heard about that one.
No, I didn't hear about that one, Kai, right.
Which impacted, you know, I wouldn't say about a quarter, but it was a fair chunk of town got hit by that. So, you know, again, like, people might get insurance payouts, but they can't get the builders to actually do the work.
That's right.
And we're almost a year on from it, like, you know, and then the cost thing, and then the frustration with insurance companies, and it's just one thing on top of another. And you know, but then we've still got all the government agencies pulling out because bushfire time is up, and, you know, we've done everything, and our 2 years of funding is finished, and bye-bye.
Like, very challenging, definitely.
It's just, I know I'm preaching to the converted, but it is just a non-stop thing.
And you've touched on a really good point there, Kai, around the funding. Like, it's important that this funding does come into communities, and something that I'm really aware of, even in and around what we're doing with the CDAT, is that sustainability of people need this ongoing support, and there's only a certain amount of money that they're going to roll out into the community. So how is it that beyond that, we're also, like, when we're getting it, that we're actually preparing for that end as well, of where that money disappears, and how do you do it? It's interesting that you say that you've reached into that philanthropic side of it. I'm not sure how many organisations might have done that, but I know that there's definitely more of that appeal going into that philanthropic side to see if they can sustain programs and funding to continue to support. And you coined it really well as well, David, in that accumulative effect. It's not just an individual that's feeling it, it's a community that's feeling it, it's a nation that's feeling it, and then we've got all of the bricks and mortar side of assets and that physical structure that's just not there. There are great things that are happening. You hear about bits and pieces, but it kind of feels a bit piecemeal. And I think that accumulatively, we all want to see something that's a little bit more sustainable, but know that it's a really big task.
Yeah, and because we're talking about, now such, I guess, sort of high-level, strategically focused type, problems that will need a strategically focused solution, I would be thinking it's going to take most of this year for the foundation to be laid for that. And so the sort of disruption and chaos and uncertainty and instability and shortage of services, that Kai was just describing, I think, unfortunately, that might kind of be the landscape for this year, but hopefully that is settling. But again, speaking from experience, the first 3 to 6 months would generally be like this anyway. But you've got significantly additional impacts on top as well. Just in this section, I guess I'm not focusing so much on the strategic or the community recovery related strategies. I had just chosen to focus more on the individual. And I think in particular, with the aim of just highlighting to you that, and this is coming off the back of these different stress states, that people can't really begin a personal recovery journey in terms of their emotional and psychological well-being, nor can they effectively engage in personal recovery from a material rebuild or recovery perspective until those heightened stress levels begin to subside and come down. For lots of different reasons, but one being, or one central reason being, the way in which the brain and particular parts of the brain are affected by the high stress state. So this is where I was just going to touch on thinking and emotions very briefly. The frontal cortex becomes impacted by heightened stress. And so we see very commonly, and this may well be even more so the case for your clients who have their pre-existing substance use challenges and difficulties, may have organic brain damage or problems, I'm not sure, but just in an ordinary disaster recovery setting, when people are in this high stress state, and this is not only survival mode, in fact, this is more endurance mode, people have a reduced capacity for problem solving. They're less verbal, but more visual. They can't think creatively. There's not flexibility of thought. And what we will see people demonstrate are more simplified emotions: anger, frustration, tearful, and upset, not complex emotions, so to speak. And so actually I'll show you some common community presentations or community member presentations, but we'll also see people jumping to conclusions, black and white thinking, being quite judgmental, with an ongoing bias towards threat. What's the next thing going to be? What's the next problem going to be? Never mind activation of that heightened state by subsequent weather events. It rains again, or the storm clouds are gathering, or there's a bad weather forecast. So I think that was my sense generally for you, that most people are in a heightened state. And I've tried to emphasize that this is sort of right at the beginning of the flood recovery process. So I don't think people are going to be even very close to being in a frame of mind that will enable them to engage with the more material aspects and physical aspects of recovery. So what I was going to suggest is that at this point, you focus mainly on the connection with people and on the stabilization and reducing stress levels in practical ways. For example, I don't know how accessible it is, but one of the organisations in Melbourne called Phoenix, whose works a lot in the area of disaster recovery, they've been piloting a program called SOLAR, which, if I show you this pyramid, sort of sits in the middle of support services. The early days, we usually focused on and talking about psychological first aid. In the first month to two, we would then be transitioning onto something like SOLAR, which is simple psychological support strategies to help people manage stress, anxiety, sleep, substance use issues. And then it's further down the track where we might make that transition into the more trauma-focused or more treatment-focused psychological help. Anyway, primitive emotions, instinctive emotions are increased, socially meaningful emotions are reduced. I wanted to show you then, just before we head towards the end, sorry for flicking through this community member presentation. So these are just three typical presentations. It's not all of them. And what I've noted here, sort of in the 2 points under each of these headings, is what you would see and observe or experience, but how this may cause you to feel. So if you get the demanding and hostile presentation, you know, we're typically then faced with somebody who has a repetitive fixation on a particular issue. You know, this comes out at community information sessions, for example, where there's, after a bushfire, always the person that wants all of the trees cut down and removed. Or there's always the person that wants all of the trees cleared. And they're fixated on it and angry about it, you know, and council just needs to get their act together and do what needs to be done. But of course, it's completely unrealistic because council is working on other things like just getting roads safe again, not clearing roadsides. They'll get to that in 6 months' time or 12 months' time. But it could be any other particular issue, and it can really, you know, penetrate your one-on-one interactions with community members. And because they can become, or often are, so focused in that state, that can cause you to feel threatened, frustrated, maybe powerless to help, because they won't typically be registering or taking on anything that you say. The opposite of that is the numb and withdrawn person. That may make you feel high levels of compassion and empathy and just wanting to support them and draw them out. Sorry, I've given a very specific example here of rebuilding, but you know, the numb and withdrawn person is disconnected and inside of themselves. You know, may sit there in front of you, not really saying or doing too much. And then we, you know, thirdly, we'll come across the highly anxious, distressed person who will just talk nonstop, you know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, without drawing breath. And that can cause you to feel like you're not going to get anything done. But what I would just say there is let them talk for as long as they need to talk, not hours, of course, but let them talk without interrupting, you know, maybe just occasionally saying something here or there, because that will be beneficial in terms of reducing that stress level. Yeah. So I want to give you some general suggestions. Just any thoughts or questions about this at the moment? You might already be aware of individual protective factors, what assists and helps people after adversity, trauma, and disaster experiences, but these are the ones that are commonly identified within the literature. A sense of safety, of course, so anything that you can possibly do to assist somebody or a family or a couple or children feel safer will be helpful. You know, it's going to deactivate that survival mechanism or at least help turn it down. Reduction of arousal, heightened stress. So this is where the stress management, calming techniques and strategies can be helpful. But I should then say people may well have access to or be aware of pre-existing techniques or things that they've done that help them feel calmer. It doesn't have to be just the standard calm breathing or relaxation exercise. Thirdly, and out of interest, a sense of control and efficacy. So that doesn't mean that, so self-efficacy is the view or the belief that I've got the skills and the abilities to face a challenge and try to work my way through it. It doesn't mean that I know I can work my way through it, but it means I've got enough belief to think that I can give it a go. And where this is important is that we can promote a sense of control and efficacy in our communication with people. Self-confidence building, self-esteem building, whilst you support people along the way. Fourthly, and it can be challenging sometimes to do this, the more tired you become, the higher your own stress levels are, the greater your own impact. Also, if you're seeing in your community that services are fractured, services are pulling out, just don't let yourself, try not to let yourself get drawn into negativity or cynicism or jadedness. Try to promote hope and optimism. Really important for people. Social support, we've touched on just the importance of that connection, and then anything you can do to reduce secondary stresses. So this will relate a lot to practical problem solving type stuff, helping with forms, sending of forms, providing information, the basic needs type stuff in these early days. And then just lastly, what I've provided you with is a couple of slides. A couple of slides about general suggestions for general communication principles. And the next slide I have here is suggestions for face-to-face communication. So you might want to come back and have a look at these rather than me reading them out to you, although I'm happy to. And I know I said these were the last two slides, but I noticed I had included this and I do want to mention it to you, which is this, that there's approximately the 20% of people and the 80% of people that we talk about. The 20% of the group of people who unfortunately go down the path of this chronic pathway. They become unwell as a result of a natural disaster experience and are going to need formal assistance and support to recover. There are then the 80% of people who aren't going to develop a mental health diagnosis or condition and won't need formal assistance and support. But then what's also been identified is that there are different pathways or trajectories of recovery. Now there will be more than this, but these are 5 key pathways that have been identified up to this point in time: chronic, resilient, delayed. So the end of the first year, coming to the 18 months, it's not uncommon for people who've been traveling quite well. We might say resilient to crash. And then you can see these other 2 pathways, resistant and growth. But anyway, it might be helpful to just show you that, because there definitely isn't a one size fits all, and there are all of the other unique individual experiences in between. Yeah, so Tanya, I just want to bring it back to the group. I mean, there's lots of other things that we could talk about or cover, but I just wanted to, again, as I said, sketch a big picture overview. Yeah, we've got time to sort of bring it back to the group for some conversation, I think, discussion, questions, whatever you'd like to do with the time remaining.
How long have we got exactly?
22 minutes. Give or take. I'm not fussed.
Nice one. Thanks for the presentation. Fantastic. I'd love to hear from the group if they have any questions, and those who don't are unable to share it verbally online, just put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat, yeah.
I'll just leave it open. I'll open the floor up to the group.
Yeah. Karen, is there anything that you wanted to contribute? Because Tenterfield have had, I know, and it's been a minute since I've been up there, but the last time that I was there, not only was it the drought that impacted, and like there was a lot of travel in those last 12 months that I did back and forth to Tenterfield, watching the paddocks go from drought to just nothing. There was dust. And then the next visit that I had came through was how the fire had come right up to the town border, like it literally just missed. And then the impacts of putting out those fires actually contaminated your water. So you've had all of those things. How are you finding the community and what's going on in that space over that time?
Yeah, we've had a lot of resilience stuff come up with RAMP and different stuff, like they've had forums and different information. The trouble is farmers are so stubborn and they won't ask for help. That's what we're finding. And all this money that was available is really the wrong people are getting it, we find. No offence to Centrelink benefits, but they're getting $1,000 here, $1,000. The smoke didn't even come near them. But, you know, it's sort of wrong. The people that really need it won't ask for help, we find.
This is the country stoicism.
It's their land, it's their responsibility. Yeah, I feel really, I mean, there is behind the scenes, people have come up with stuff, you know, dropping off food, things like that. And we've been involved with that. But yeah, you don't really know the real impact. I know now the farmers have never said it at all, but they're all whinging about the rain now. Like they can't even get wood for their heaters at the moment. It's just simple things that no one can. So it's a ripple effect. People in town can't get wood delivered because those that do it, they can't get into any of the places. So that's only a little smidget of what we're feeling at the moment with that. But otherwise, yeah, no. It's, I think.
So they're not.
Yeah.
So they're not very help seeking. Is that what you're finding, Karen?
No. I don't know if Gail remembers. Remember when we did the CDAT run and we did the outskirts of town with the survival pack it was. I think we had different stuff in there, and then we just had a little CDAT spiel. We got some good responses, and then we got a response to say, you're saying I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict. And we're like, well, you know, and it was kind of tricky, but we learnt from that. Yeah, we just give them a little pack we done up, but we see that stuff we ordered. They took the Bicky and the cups of tea stuff, but didn't want the flyers that came with it. It was just awareness. That's all we were doing.
Yeah. And supporting those conversations of those allied health services that were out there as well. It was also part of that other project was to support them in knowing that there is this program that's out there that can support some of that. So it had, we can't satisfy everyone, Karen. We did identify that. We didn't.
No, there was only a couple. There was one rude man that we sort of tried to be as polite as we could, you know, but that wasn't our intention. No, a lot of sorry.
Are there, Karen, out that way or in that community, Tenterfield and surrounds, are there many community-based activities or events that run regularly?
Yeah, we've had a lot of stuff running, and Drake's, you know, east from us here. And out in Mingoola and Deepwater, there's been some lovely functions running and stuff. So that's been helpful. But yeah, it's more the farmers that I think, just take this information. But we did post some stuff too. We've had other ways to get around it, just post it all to them. But we've got Gina Carpenter, who's at the council now. She lives and eats and breathes it. So she gets it. She's come around with some ideas on how to. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that that's the other thing to recognise as well, David. We know that we all show up in many different ways, and sometimes some of those silver linings that come out of these catastrophes and disasters that we're experiencing is other people come into the conversation. Other people then go, hey, I'm here and I can help. So it does have, it's that balance, you know, the good, the bad, what's that movie? The bad and the ugly, all of those things that go with it. It's around that. Miranda and Dominique, is there anything that you'd like to share with us or a query? My vast dive.
I don't at the moment. I've found it really interesting though. It's been good just to listen in.
Fantastic.
I do
Thank
agree
you.
with the ones that as soon as they know there's money coming out, they all get it before, you know, and they're not in affected areas. It's definitely something that's frustrating, but how do you get that sorted? Anyway, but yeah, no, it's been very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Miranda. Dominique?
I'm not sure if she had to go out. She did message me about 10, 15 minutes ago and said to keep her up to date. She just had a phone call and was ducking out of the office to take it. So I wasn't sure if she was back.
Okay. And Di, I know that this is probably one of the most least pleasant experiences of being online, but we'd certainly welcome any input that you've got there as well. So please pop it in the chat. I'm hovering over it to see if there's anything that comes up. Kai, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think everyone's kind of covered off on the main things. And I think that's the hard stuff is like there's a lot of us that know, we know what the problems are. It's just trying to get, you know, particularly the emergency response side of things, like for the services that are involved there, you know, trying to push people like, you know, the DPI, for instance, because they handled all the mice plague stuff and the drought stuff as well, because it doesn't get declared an emergency. You know, just trying to make sure that when there's feedback for that kind of stuff, to actually say, hey, 2 years isn't enough. You know, and I think it's always frustrating when you know you've got that evidence there that they know that it's long term, and that they know that there's, you know, it takes time for people to get to the point of actually wanting assistance, and or that they realize that they can't do it on their own, and then it's like they finally realize, and oh no, that funding closed last year, you can't access it. Or, you know, that person that has finally just built that relationship with them, they're wrapping up, you know, their roles, their contracts up. And so, yeah, it's, you know, as I said, I'm aware that everyone's kind of aware. So I don't think I need to waffle on much more.
What about you, Josh, from the perspective of being a community development officer in this space, and like you're reaching out across, as you say, 10 different communities? Is there anything that you'd like to share with us?
It's interesting seeing it in perspective, from this perspective. I'm sorry if I cut in and out. My internet's playing real funny buggers right now. But yeah, being able to see it, you know, on the page and the stages people are at, and people can be at very different stages, knowing that they may have gone through different crosses over so many periods, and how I should interact more in person as well. That was one of the last key points there that I took. Although that's really difficult because many people have become accustomed to meeting online, and it seems quicker and easier. Just that stopping on the doorstep may help, that being there. So that's really, that's rung true to me, that I should try and get out a little bit more. But yeah, it's interesting for me, just on a personal level too, hearing it all and how it sits with me and what I'm going through indirectly, and how I don't have to be so directly impacted to feel the impacts of what everyone else is going through and why that's
Right.
taking a toll on me. So yeah, and it's so I can understand that it is going to be a long journey out. And although I've said I'm hopeful for a really clean, clear next year of funding and that it's all going to go really well, that there is a long path to recovery, and I am going to have to be gentle with that and understand that through this whole process, that it won't just be a quick bounce back in, we're happy and Larry, good to go. We're going to go through these stages for a long time. So I'm taking a great thing out of this, really. It's given me a lot to think about. So big thank you to you, David. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Josh. About you, Tanya?
I mean, I could spend hours talking about this stuff because it's great. Thank you. I wanted to ask specifically around, so I see the stage of the community being tired. I know I'm tired, fatiguing. The devastation visually, sensory, it's all still visceral. So I wanted to know, to connect up, to create that social capital and that belonging. What's some of the activities you've seen in communities with similar disasters that have been in that stage, in that phase, developed?
Yeah, all sorts of things, Tanya, many and varied. Just by the way, once the material, I guess, impact and devastation starts to become less, as things that I haven't been to Lismore, so I don't know exactly what it looks like or what the intricate details are, but a bushfire equivalent is as the regrowth starts to return, for example,
right,
and as the roads are repaired,
right,
and as blocks are cleared, then there is a clear link that's been identified between people's personal health and well-being and these things occurring. They represent progress and change. So I think I just wanted to mention that at the outset, because I would imagine there will be improvement across the course of this year materially in Lismore, and you'll see changes, and hopefully, and that will provide a level of benefit to people. And it does sometimes give communities a real lift. I could give you lots of examples of that, but I'll just let you know that does happen. It can really lift people's spirits. So there's that. In terms of community activities and events, there are so many. Where to start? I'll pluck a few examples out. But if I just say, you can come up, you could definitely and suggest them, because you're a community member as well. Can you hear me all right still?
Yeah,
sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah. But also keep an eye and an ear out for what community members themselves might come up with as a possibility. And what can be helpful and useful is to fund them. I don't know if you've got capacity to do that in your organisation in CDAT. But so, for example, in Victoria at the moment, now this is an example that relates to secondary school students. There's a creative arts-led project. So this is coming out of the Black Summer fires, whereby there's a partnership with, I think, Creative Arts Victoria. And what they have organised for is an artist in residence to visit different schools and spend time with secondary school students. And if they want to be involved in this creative arts-led project, which is about recovery following the fires, they can be. That's, one simple example. An example that I personally really love is one called the Letterboxes Project, which came out of the Black Saturday fires in 2009. Have you heard of this? Anybody? Saw a few expressions that maybe you had. And so what this was essentially a project that went across a series of years, I think 3 years or 4 years, whereby a woman who was burnt out opened up her house to community members that lived in her area. And the project was to build a mosaic letterbox. They're quite large, for every single community member in their community. Took them a fair bit of time. So they would, of course, meet on a regular basis. There's a couple of things to highlight here, right? Like there was the finished product of letterboxes for everybody. But it was actually the process and the journey that was so fundamental, because you got these community members, women who came together and just talked about life and what they were going through, and about their, fire survival experiences and recovery experiences. But, what turns up on these letterboxes, these mosaic letterboxes, symbolic representations and very literal representations of recovery. And so there's this video clip on YouTube you can go and watch, where a woman is saying, "Oh, this is my beautiful horse that died in the fire, but here's our pet dog that survived. And, on this side, there's a house that burned down. We lived there for 20 years, but on this side, here's the house that we're rebuilding." And, it's just this beautiful narrative woven into the letterbox. And on this particular YouTube clip, as an example of informal processing and digestion of an experience, there is one particular community member who sort of can barely string a word together at the start. Her brain is so offline with stress, although she is talking about how difficult it is for her to come back to the community. She's dislocated, living elsewhere, house burned down. I won't go on too much here. But, you sort of get to the third year where she's being sort of interviewed and talking to the camera, and she's actually articulating in words what she's learned as a person by going through this experience. And that's the fundamental benefit, one of the fundamental benefits of community, led activities and events that bring people together. So the Letterboxes project is an example. I've heard of projects that taught people how to use chainsaws. I've heard of blacksmithing projects where people came together and made things. Some of these, though, were, turned into, we used anniversaries, memorials, I guess. So many. Actually, I came across one. So June 9 last year in Melbourne, we had a severe weather event, a storm, which actually in the Dandenong Ranges and in the Yarra Ranges, which is not far from Melbourne CBD, an hour max. Do you know there were as many homes totally destroyed by that storm in that one night than there were the Black Summer fires in Victoria? As many, 456, I think, from memory. And that's sort of not even showing up on the radar. The average, community have no idea that this has happened. And this is Dandenong Ranges is CBD Melbourne, pretty much. So I spoke to a community member, and she has put together what she called it. I'd have to look it up, but it's something like Conversations and a Cuppa, or Conversations in a Teacup, or she might have even called it Storm in a Teacup and Conversations, I think. Was pretty catchy. And so she got $1,000 from council, has hired out the hall, on a Friday, right through to the end of the year. She's there from 10:30 to 12:30. She's had a chat with somebody about psychological first aid. She's completed a mental health first aid online course, so she knows how to triage somebody and link them into a service if there's a need. And she's getting about 20 people turning up every Friday.
That's cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said around those examples that you've given as well, David. Like a lot of in areas where we've worked specifically with young people, we've often identified that looking at them face to face does not produce the right kind of conversations. It's not conducive to that. But sitting with them shoulder to shoulder and doing something that is slightly distracting of the mind, there's a wealth of information that comes from it. And what you've brought out of that for me, what's really stood out is that creative projects actually support the process and the journey. It's those sorts of projects that in the world of CDAT that we perhaps can have a look at as well, because it takes away the feeling of being the only person in it. It also helps to shift perhaps some of that stubbornness that we sense in people of, I don't need that help, I just need to get on with it. So it's a really, as we call it, beautiful soft entry point for people to come in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's right. There's stories, and you know, with the storytelling, what sort of is becoming more apparent, although I think the way we're starting to think about it is that storytelling in the early phase, and storytelling doesn't necessarily mean standing up and telling my story in front of people. It can just mean being in a room, storming a teacup, you know, and talking to other people there. That supports that processing and digestion of what I am going through. Ideally, there's a point where that ends, of course, you know, and I have processed and digested it, and my stress levels have reduced, and my heightened emotions have reduced, and raw trauma has subsided. And then in my telling of a story, I'm actually creating a representation for somebody else about what it was like to go through the experience and reach an end point. And that can become a really useful reference for somebody too. Does that make sense? There's a continuum there. There's the beginning of which the beginning is working it out. And, you know, then there's the point where I've worked it out. But if I'm meeting in a social setting and sharing that with somebody who hasn't even begun the process, so that might be a year or two down the track, well, that gives them a way potentially to think about what I need to do that doesn't involve talking to a psych. Yeah, which is going to have, I think, a lot of reach for a lot of people, given we know most people are going to come through to see a psych.
Yeah. It is that, it's that progressive journey of there's only so much that can happen within our peer references and peer groups. Right. And then moving on into that professional help to then further unpack it in a really safe way, come out with some strategies and solutions that work for you as a person. We know one size does not fit all across many different areas of life, and to think that we can approach it from that is foolish and ignorant of us to be in that. Another point that just really stood out for me, David, that you shared is in the storytelling and the journey that they go through. When we're at the beginning and we're hopeful that it's a quick fix and a quick recovery, and then we're in the middle of it and we know that it's a long journey, but someone is at the end of, like, they've gotten to their point, they are rebuilding, they feel like they're nurtured and supported. Sharing that with people that are caught in that space or at the beginning space as well is just helps them to put things into that paradigm that we work with in our minds of where I should be in life, and those expectations that come with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
David, we could definitely sit and talk about this, not just today, but for days. Mindful, we've got people.
Of course.
Tanya, I'll mute myself and let you take over from here.
No, I wanted to thank David for his time, his knowledge, and his compassion, obvious compassion in your nature and the work that you're doing. It's fantastic.
No worries. Thanks, Tanya.
And if you can just put me back at host, because if you leave, you're going to cut us all off.
Oh, okay. Right. How do I do that? How do I do that? Any direction?
It should be down in the security. I haven't got the security button anymore. So if you've got security that comes up.
Yes. Okay.
And then just, David. And I think I'm not sure if you click on me and just up in where you get the little mute button and the 3 dots, you may be able to click on my image and just revert me back to host in there if it's not on that security one.
Or if you go to your participants, you go to CDAT New South Wales, click highlight over more.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there we go. I can reclaim it. I've got it.
You got it? Okay.
I have. Thanks, Tanya. All of those different spaces that we work in. Thank you so much, David. It has been truly appreciated, and particularly from this northern region as well. And I look forward to doing some more creative projects to help the process and the journey of our CDATs.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye.
No worries. Bye.
So we've only got a couple that are left online. Tanya, Josh, over to you with regards to what might be relevant. We would look that naturally evaluation is always something that I get my hook into. We've only got a couple though, so we might need to do that a little bit differently.
Does anybody want a break?
Well, we've only got Kai, Miranda and Karen. Karen looks like she's ducked out. Yeah, open to you guys if there's more that you'd like to talk about with us. Otherwise, we can give you back some time, but we will be following up with everyone for just some feedback from you as well.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions, but I think they're going to be better suited to be answered by the larger audience. So I'll keep everyone's emails and send out those questions. There's only about 5 or so of them, and they're quite short, just to gain a little bit more about your local area, some things that are working, any challenges, and that will help us when we build our regional action plans. That'll help us guide and work on that. So yeah, I think in the interest of the best responses, I think leaving that on until later would be, probably for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Kai, is there anything else that you'd like to ask today whilst we're here, or can we give you back a little bit of time?
Was there something about going through the draft action plan thingamabob outline?
It was perhaps the evidence-based activity guide.
Yeah.
Happy to do that with you if that's what you'd like, just to have a bit of a look at it. It's not completely finalized in the sense of looking pretty, but the data is definitely finalized within there. So would you like me to bring that up?
I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember whether it was finished and to be discussed today or what it was. So that's all good.
That was the original goal. We did hope to have it completely finalized, and then we're actually going to send out a copy to everyone, and then we were going to kind of go through it just as how we can use that guide to develop our activities going forward and how to use it and things like that. I know that there will be a space for that later on. I know the state conference will be touching on that a little bit, but if you'd like to look at it now, I'm sure, Gail, if you wanted to give a summary of it or put it up on the screen, we could, but otherwise, we can do it at a later date.
Sure. What I have got is a presentation that I have used at previous conferences. So I'm just only okay. I just want to now share my screen. Okay. All righty. We're able to see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll just move a couple of things so that I haven't got myself looking at myself too much there. And again there. All righty. So evidence-based activity guide is something that those that were previously a part of the CDATs would have heard that there was this resource that was out there. What we've done under the new contract is just expand upon that as well, and hopefully just try and make it a little bit more real, in the sense of give you some more guidance, give you a greater list of resources in order to be able to know what it is to lean into, to have a look at those specifics around that primary prevention evidence-based activity. Now, what David's just mentioned in and around the creative projects, that's something that is really evidence-based as well. So please keep those things in mind. I won't read through every single slide, but as you can, you'll be able to read it yourself. The aim of it is to give you those extra examples and resources to provide you with links and keeping that focus on primary prevention. What we ask you to look at is understanding the differences between the risk factors and the protective factors. Again, David covered off on that really well around looking at what sort of protective factors are there within the community, what else could you introduce, and how is it that can support you in the work that you do with your CDATs. So we know what the risks are like. I'll leave it there for a second so that you can go through it. I certainly don't want to insult anybody's intelligence here, because you're the ones that are out there on the ground doing it. So you see these every day. And then the protective factors as well, of what it is that we're able to actually create how we can provide that to communities and start to have those conversations with them. Tegan at the very beginning made a really good comment around why they focus on youth is because that there's so many other elements that come into those that connect with youth and talk to youth. So it's a really great conduit for being able to connect with those other people as well. So primary prevention, again, it's just showing you the differences between primary, secondary and tertiary, and how it is that we can look to address some of those preventative measures. So what does it look like? We know that all communities are different, but what we do see within the CDAT program are some common themes that come out. So your transport, your engagement with young people, your opportunities, and like all of those other cascading factors, homelessness, domestic violence, they all impact on it. It's intergenerational behaviours of families and those sorts of things. So what we're trying to do is just provide you with opportunities to think about it and bring it into the evidence-based format as well. So the framework for CDATs, again, I just keep repeating myself in that sense of evidence-based means that we're using the best available measurements the scientific stuff that we can measure and evaluate. So measurements and evaluations are a really big part of our program. Really keen to hear, Kai, what's happened, like what sort of feedback you got from Annie Bleeker. And again, we had her as a 4-part series last year online. The feedback that we got, we found that it was really helpful. So I'm really, really interested to hear what it is that's come out of those sessions that you've had as well.
Yeah, I haven't processed it yet. I've got the wad of paper and all
well,
that.
We'll have to share with you some of the tricks that we've learned around online and QR codes and surveys, so it does it for you. But,
I normally actually use Microsoft Forms and send for our other programs. That's what I use. We just hadn't been organised enough.
No, please don't. No, it's not about being organised. It's about it's about the volume of work that you're actually undertaking as well. So it's huge. And you said it was only last week?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to be a little bit glib in my in being a bit of a clown and saying, well, come on, it was last week. But no, that's all good. You've got until the end of June, mate. So it's no drama, no pressure. So another thing that we recognise as well within the work that we do, and this is information again that you would be facing on a daily basis, is the level of stigma that actually prevents people from engaging with us. So part of what we're trying to achieve within the CDAT program is helping to shift some of that narrative in the language that we use so that people don't feel like they aren't able to reach out and find some sort of assistance or support or pathway that will help them with it. So we just give a bit of an understanding of what stigma is, the processes of it, and ways that we can work to reduce some of that. Again, I won't read over all of this. I'm just repeating myself. Happy to send this out to Josh, Tina and Tanya to forward on to you though, so that you can have a more thorough read of it. The measuring of CDAT activities, again, this is my big catch cry: evaluation, evaluation, evaluation. Asking questions. It doesn't need to be hard questions. They're really simple statements that people will make as well that we're able to collect a lot of data from. But it's really important that we have this information so that we are able to feed it back to the Ministry of Health and demonstrate to them the work that you're doing on the ground and how it is actually impacting and making a difference. Slow it may be, but it does make a difference. And if we've got half a dozen young people that decide to take a different pathway through the activities that you're delivering, they're going to tell another half a dozen people, and it's that cascading effect that we talk about. So evaluation is extremely important to us. Again, we do expect you to evaluate the 3 key questions that we're asking is: how has your session, activity, project or program increased the knowledge of their about alcohol and drugs? Has it supported them in any way to want to change their behaviour? and does it increase their knowledge on where to find help? So very simple things. They can be reworded. A question that came to me is, when we're talking about young people, that we're not asking them under the age of 18, but a suggestion that came in is, or the exact words Tina sent through to me earlier, but it was coined really well, that it wasn't specific to AOD, but it definitely asked them to tell us whether or not it had changed the way that they see some things in their lives. So the measurement examples, so these are the types of tools that we ask you to use. It's data collection, questionnaires, interviews, the correlation, so it's that feedback from the broader community, and case studies. Case studies are really, really valuable in that space as well. Some of the suggested activities. So alcohol is a really big space that we work in. We know that there's a number of different layers. So we encourage you to look at those different layers if that's the focus of your CDAT. Other drugs, young people, so we look around the drugs in the developing brain, career preparation, youth mentoring and peer support. We know in the mentoring and peer support space that there's a lot of value that actually comes from that. We've identified mental health. Again, I'm not going to go right through them, but where we've got mental health, we actually capture that as well further down in the social and emotional well-being. And all of these have a number of, it's got explanations and links of resources that you can tap into, or programs that you can explore to see whether or not they fit for your community. Activities that are not supported, again, there's just a few things that we ask that you don't do, as it sits outside of that primary prevention and harm minimisation space, and we're not actually able to collect the data. One of the things that we do have that I feel is very different, that's the end of that one, so I'll stop sharing, is being able, we've got a really strong connection with the Ministry of Health. I catch up with the ministry on a fortnightly basis, and we talk about, I'm able to talk about the things that are actually coming up organically within the program, and looked to help them to understand what we're actually facing on the ground and how it is that we can direct our support and provide that to the CDATs across New South Wales as well. So it's a good exercise. It's a good relationship that we've got. We have had a bit of a change in who we report to, but that's neither here nor there to you guys on the ground. But more than anything, they're certainly more receptive to the conversations of those grassroots activities where they want the evidence, and they were sort of speaking at that higher range of those strategic programs. They still want to see some of that, but what we've been able to do is get them to also recognise that this is a grassroots community program. That's where the differences will come from. So it's being able to support you in that space as well. So Kai, I know it was really quick and really, really rushed all the way through it, but we do have an electronic copy that we can share with you now, but I'm just finalising with the graphic designer a really pretty version of it. But there's certainly a document out there that you can lean into, particularly coming towards the end of this year's funding, to just start to have some of those conversations with your members, look at what it is that you'd like to do. Do you want to continue to build upon what you've done this year? You've got another 12 months of funding coming up. So can you extend upon that and strengthen what you've already done? Or do you want to take a different focus? So that's where Josh and Tina come into the scene to have those conversations with you.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think that was the tricky thing, was like trying to navigate all of that stuff quickly. With that shorter time frame of getting organised and the funding rolling over and all that stuff. And then, yeah, just trying to find as well, like I know offhand that we haven't spent enough of that money yet. So now I'm like, all right, what can we do in the next month that's going to chew up the rest of the funding? And to be able to have something to at least come back to and reference and go, you know, just, I'm very efficient. It's also known as being lazy, in that I don't want to waste my time chasing something if it's not going to work. So if I can just look at a list of things and go, oh yeah, tick, 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 that's a whole lot easier. So yeah,
certainly.
That's why I was interested about that.
Yeah, I know that all of the CDOs do have a copy of that, and Tina's so unwell today. Like, we literally forced her to get offline because you could see it after 5 minutes.
Eyes were falling out.
Yeah, literally. But we can definitely get that out to you next week, Kai, when she's back on deck.
Yeah,
So
I think she
have a look at it.
I think she sent the draft to me yesterday.
Yeah.
Actually. So
have that you can feel confident that you can lean into that. The content's not going to change. It's just the way that it's designed and how it falls upon the eye more than anything. But if you're struggling to think about what you might be able to do, I know that you guys had all of those fridge magnets. So even if you were trying to get them out into broader community, you can use some of your funding for postage as well. Like, that's an effective way of distributing your resources so that you've got that broader touch point with your communities as well. At this point of the calendar time, to actually create an activity might not work, but you might be able to support something that's out there that's already engaging with young people. You might be able to add value to something that's already running in your community that they might just need a little bit of a hand to get to the end of the financial year with. So just have a look at that EBA, have a chat to Tina, and we're here to support you with that and help you spend that money, because we don't want it back. We really
I don't want to give money back.
Gail, I think last time we were in that situation, we just bought some resources, Kyle, and we end up using them for Youth Week and different things like that. I think it was like bags, just little bits and pieces, a torch, different.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, stress balls.
Stress balls, all that. So anyway, just
even I was even thinking about like promotional, you can get like footies with promotional stuff on them.
That's great.
The kids love handballs at the moment. They're all playing handballs, like so I don't know. There's plenty of stuff I'm sure you can spend your money on.
Yeah. And Kai, just a little tip, Karen's actually quite the resource queen. She knows where to go, how to find it, what sorts
of things. That was a long time ago. Yeah, we could probably find all that stuff. Yeah, and Danielle helped me too from Glen Innes. Expensive stuff. I was on a shoestring budget to her, so Can
I inquire, Kai, how much you might have left?
What's the total again?
I think you got $7,000.
7. So I think we've spent by the time we get that 4, 5, we've probably spent 5 out of the 7.
Oh, that's not too bad. So another resource that like going along with what Karen said of stuff that you can use at other events, but there is a minimum order on this, but there might be 1 or 2 other CDATs that might be interested, is the standard drink cups. So
I got given 2 boxes of them.
Oh, there you go. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Karen, no?
We still got lots of them left. We had to buy the 2,000 or whatever.
1,000,
And we put them out with our autumn day thing here. We had the show. We put them. I'm trying. I can't. I need to send them somewhere else.
The problem is though. Well, as a side note, because they're plastic, they're no good for putting beer in because you lose all the bubbles out of them.
Probably not meant for beer.
I know, but they're shaped like a schooner glass.
I know.
So it's like, what else am I meant to put in?
Yeah, the other thing, you have a lot of events in Armidale, Kai, like you had your ice skating thing. I know that's family orientated, but we jumped on things like that and they just went into a show bag or something.
Yeah.
With info. So maybe I'm sure you'll think outside the box and go, we'll
find something.
Yeah. Bloody plastic cups.
Yeah. Josh, did you want to say something?
No, I'm just laughing. Laughing along.
But that's because then that's a hard thing too. It's like, oh yeah, we can give them to all the kids. No, okay, that's probably not,
Yeah, in the
you
parent
know.
bag.
You
It's
can
fine.
give
We'll
them
get
to
there.
young people, like targeted, definitely not 6-year-olds, but if you've got those younger ones like at year 7 as well, it's a really good conversation starter. They do, my kids have just gone, oh really, mum, like seriously. They've seen them in our kitchen cupboards growing up. So I've had them around ever since they were about 12. My kids are now in there, well, one's almost 28 and the other one's turned 23. And, you know, they still talk about it. So, but it doesn't need to specifically be that high, but definitely that encouragement what Karen's given you about look at what resources can add value or create a conversation and support something else.
We actually had to give some were doing the RSA at the TAFE. So Kai, we just give out some of that through them as well, because we just had thousands and we
okay. I might go have a chat to the community college.
Exactly.
Well. Okay.
Because it's about creating conversations. Incidental, accidental, and purposeful conversations are all a part of what we do.
Yep.
Good stuff. Well, we're at 5 to 1. We did have it until 2, but I think that it's a good use of time to give you back an hour of your time today. You can go stretch your legs and, you know, process the information that you've got. Tanya and Josh, thank you so much. I'm very blessed to have a fantastic team right across the state, but these guys in particular, it almost seems like someone's got a little bit of something going on in the background. Every time we've organised a forum, something's happened and we haven't been able to do it. So I really appreciate the efforts that you guys have put into it. And going back to our motto is we are stronger together. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks. Good to be here.
Awesome.
Have a nice afternoon, folks. We'll see you at the conference.
All righty.
Want to stay with me for a minute, Josh?
Yeah, I will.